As we enter the deep part of the winter season, I couldn't help but revisit Evermore. Evermore is Taylor Swift's ninth record. It dropped as a surprise on December 11th, 2020. It's widely regarded as Folklore's sister album due to its sound and production team, which comprised of Swift herself, Aaron Dessner of The National, and of course Jack Antonoff. Folklore itself has such a rich legacy, being credited as the start of Swift's meteoric rise back to the pinnacle of mainstream music, and her third album of the year Grammy win, all three of them being split across 3 different decades, mind you. Evermore never really got its moment in the sun. It was overshadowed because it came just 5 months after Folklore, it debuted during the holiday season, and then it was overshadowed by Fearless Taylor's version in the spring of 2021. In spite of that, it still spawned a #1 hit, Willow, and it debuted at #1. It even garnered its own Album of the Year nomination. This video is going to be a celebration and dissection of Evermore, a thematically rich album that I argue at some points actually does surpass its more popular sister. This video is going to be structured a little bit differently. I'll go over different themes that I noticed of the record than the tracks themselves before assigning this record a new score. The Darker Sister. Part of why Folklore is so beloved is because it demonstrates Swift's ability to write songs and stories beyond her established diaristic fare. Folklore comprised of different stories, ranging from a teenage love triangle to a recounting of Rebecca Harkness's life, to the whims and fleeting thoughts that she's had. Evermore continues in that direction, but through a darker, impressionistic lens. I always found the appeal of Folklore was its romantic point of view. Every track on the album has an airiness to it. It tends to lean towards the light. The closing track, The Lakes, is a gorgeous ode to themes about escapism and a lean towards positive cathartic resolution. Love triangle closer Betty itself is a really happy ending to a tumultuous story. Evermore, on the other hand, is a more earthy, weighty album. The tracks on this record are more grounded, they have a darker feel to them. There's a song about getting away with murder on the record, for God's sakes. Even the bonus track, Closer, It's Time to Go, has this melancholic, realistic air to it, where Folklore touches on youthful motifs like teenage love or remembering what it was like to be 7. Evermore is about adulthood and how messy it is, how love and life does not work out all the time. Folklore, in my opinion, was a reflection of what is or was. The love triangle concludes, the last great American dynasty and epiphany memorialize people from Swift's life. Even the opener, The One, speaks from a place of finality. Evermore itself, up until the final track, is concerned with what if, with a lean on wistfulness. But back to Evermore and romance. Love is messy. One thing about Evermore is a majority of the songs concern themselves with relationships, particularly strained romantic relationships. The first song, Willow, is a notable exception to the rule, even though it's more or less a witchy incantation beckoning its listener to love the narrator. It definitely feels like a predecessor to her later track Mastermind in that it speaks to the efforts that she'll go to ensure that this lover loves her back. It's no coincidence that the next track, Champagne Problems, is a devastating fan favorite from the perspective of a would-be bride who has turned down an engagement. There's a particular edit to the song for Joe and Laurie from Little Woman that I really just love to watch. Champagne Problems is just such a rich recounting. The lyrics paint a very vivid picture down to disappointed family members and a bridge that could be its own video talking about it. Interestingly enough, it shifts towards a more hopeful view that at least her former fiancé will find someone who patches up the tapestry that she shred and plays the role of the happy bride one day. Gold Rush is a personal favorite of mine and another Swiftenoff classic. It touches on killing a potential but unattainable love in the cradle. 'Tis the Damn Season and Dorothea are thought to be 2 halves of a fractured reunion between an actress and her small-town former flame during the holidays in Tupelo, Mississippi. Sad Story does not have a definitive conclusion. Tolerate It, possibly the most devastating of the brutal, heartbreaking track 5s that Swift traditionally drops, touches on an uneven age gap love affair that's on the rocks. This track in particular flips the imagery that she used in Invisible String to barbed wire. This was a connection I never personally got until a friend of mine recently pointed out some parallels between the 2 tracks. And it's very magical during the Eras tour where she recreates the scene during her Evermore set. Nobody No Crimes takes place in the grisly aftermath of the narrator's fictional friend Estee's death at the hands of her husband who is cheating on her. Happiness never fails to make me cry. I think it is the emotional centerpiece of the record, one of them at least, and it apparently was one of the last tracks written for this record. This one's unique in that it takes us through both sides of a decaying love. It acknowledges the very adult idea that when we break up, we're both the authors of pain and joy in the stories going their separate ways. Verse 2 of Happiness in particular remains one of my favorite couplets written by Swift, the mix of Gatsby imagery and the relatability of it all. And the bridge, the lines that end with, "and you know you heard him too," put this on a similar tier to Champagne Problems. The lines about the dress that she wore at midnight speak to Cinderella imagery that has really pervaded Swift's career throughout the years. Coney Island with the National marks yet another hidden gem. This one's another track that speaks to the idea of relationships that are unbalanced, but what really makes the track work is the conversational nature of the track. There's a back and forth between Swift and Berninger that really hammers in that sense of regret. A cool theme of this is the implication that the narrator and the subject themselves have prioritized personal achievement over their loves. Ivy is what I consider a sister to August on Folklore, both in its subject matter and Antonoffian production. Where August has the innocence of a casual summer fling gone wrong, this one is just a straight-up adult affair, with the illicit affair being Ivy growing over the home built by the narrator and her husband. This track is really hypnotic, almost ancestral sonically from a time long past. The bridge incites this fiery metaphor that this love that is forbidden is both fire and war. The ever-present danger of being found out could lead to morbid and deathly consequence. Not all is lost though. The most romantic track on the record, arguably, Cowboy Like Me, actually does have a happy ending. However, the subject matter of the track are two con artists unsure if their attraction is part of their game. My favorite line is "Forever's the sweetest con," which is extremely romantic but fatalistic. I find it really ironic that the most morally questionable characters in this story get the happiest song, even if the narrator herself goes through the ringer, as evidenced by the bridge. It seems that Taylor really did mean it when she said cruelty wins in the movies. I can't finish discussing love on Evermore without talking about my personal favorite track, Right Where You Left Me. It's a song from the perspective of a woman frozen in a moment at a restaurant when the one that she loved told her that it was over. This particular track bleeds into Swift's diaristic self, particularly with details that one could trace to her real life, but it still exists as a hypothetical story. I've always interpreted it as an epilogue of sorts to the Red Era, as it shares some sonic and lyrical DNA. The bridge in particular speaks to criticisms that she got during the Red Era if we really take the 23 years old lyric at face value. But in Evermore's more narrative context, it continues that thorough line of discussing romance not as a sparkly construct, but something that can wound, kill, and hurt. Right Where You Left Me actually ties into another major theme that I want to discuss. What could have been? A big theme that I caught on re-listening is a pervading idea of what if, but not from a romantic lens, one that's more mournful. Evermore ruminates, much like Midnight's does, which makes sense because they are sequential records. Right Where You Left Me really plays into that theme with the final subsection where the narrator contemplates that she's sure that her former flame has a wife, kids, and Christmas out there. Imagination becomes a prison. You can see this reflected in Gold Rush particularly. This track is really steeped in jealousy and insecurity. The narrator sings about falling in love with this person that everybody wants, hence them being a gold rush. The first half has the narrator daydreaming of what could be, while the second half really pulls the rug under us with the sobering truth that it will never be. Her mind has turned that person's life into folklore, which is a cheeky reference, but also she's turned him into a myth. Something that she cannot dare to dream about anymore because it's not real. Even the instrumental itself does play with the airiness and richness of a daydream that's luxurious, but this daydream is fool's gold. "'Tis the Damn Season" and Dorothea's storyline about an actress, Dorothea, and her ex having a fling also does play into this idea. "'Tis the Damn Season" is a proposition to reunite just for a little out of nostalgia from Dorothea's end. But we do see cracks of doubt in the bridge where she talks about how she'll just go back to LA to her fake friends, and she mourns the idea of losing someone who sees which smile she's faking. Conversely, Dorothea gives us her ex's point of view. This charming, sweet track sees him asking hypothetical questions and reminiscing about old times. The chorus beckons her to come back to Tupelo. There's one really sad moment that I think is underrated where he says that he guesses he'll never know and that she'll just go on with the show. It's that brief little moment of resigned disappointment about what could be if she did come back to him, and it's interesting that these two could come back together, but it's never outright resolved if they do, so we're left ourselves thinking, what if they did? Tolerated itself is an internalized monologue. It's a recounting of an ordinary day of being tolerated but not loved by someone you really admire. The bridge switches from a more observational lens to a hypothetical one, asking where was that man that she fell in love with, and then it ends with an empty threat of, okay, well, what if I just left? What if I just took this dagger in me and removed it? I gained the weight of you and lost it. What really makes the track devastating, though, is that the last lyric really does imply that the cycle will just start again, that this was all an imaginary exercise. Evermore is rooted in a lot of regrets, both past tense and future. I think that part of why the record gets eclipsed by Folklore is that it's not an easy listen. It's an emotional journey that really requires active listening and a specific mood. Which brings me to my final major theme observation. Closure. There's another word for finale that really screams Evermore to me. Denouement. It's a very sobering way of saying the end. One thing I really do like about Evermore is that these tracks all have a conclusion to them or a sense of finality. Many of them have this almost fatalistic hand to them. In an interview with Apple Music, Taylor herself said that closure was a theme of the record. One track I haven't talked about, Long Story Short, is probably the most personal track on this record to Taylor, as it's an outright short recap of the 2016 drama and the Reputation saga. In many ways, it feels like a coda to that time in her life. Verse 3 has her telling her past self that her nemeses would defeat themselves, and she changes up the chorus at the very end to say, long story short, I survived. Marjorie, an ode to her grandmother, much like how track 13 Epiphany off Folklore was to her grandfather, touches on the idea of closure as well. While Taylor misses her and wishes that she had spent more time trying to learn from her and be with her, she feels as if Marjorie is still there with her, feeling her all around. There is a literal track named Closure that exists on the record, and this one has a unique texture to it thanks to BJ Burden's co-production. Some like to call it the Pots and Pans song, but I do think that it's one of the more powerful experimental tracks. Outright, this could be addressed to so many different people, former friends, current foes, but it's very clear that whatever this was is over, and the bridge is unique in that it confirms that the letter sender really was the one at fault for everything that had gone wrong. The blame is not shared, and closure is really only asked for by the guilty, which is a unique point of view that I didn't realize could apply to my actual life as well. It's revelations like that that really do make Swift's music click for me, like the application to personal life. I think that it's a powerful admonishment of whomever it's written about. The standard closer, Evermore, with Bon Iver, who really still registers to me as a jump scare when he comes on, it closes out the record in a very hopeful way. It's this meditative piano ballad with a very conversational bridge that shifts the tempo to make this more dynamic. Most interestingly, I do think that this track also does a very trademark Swiftian lyric switch, where I had a peculiar feeling that this pain would be forevermore gets changed to wouldn't at the very end. Taylor's skill is contextualizing her lyrics and her words very wisely. But I do think that the most effective track about the theme of closure is It's Time to Go. It's this bonus track that serves as the closer for the album, for me at least. This one just feels like a charming summary of the record at large. Each verse talks about different kinds of situations where it's time to go, whether it's a dinner that's gone cold, or a friend who's just not the twin that they seemed, a crook that was caught, someone that has been passed over for a promotion, or parents that should just get a divorce. In all of those cases, it's over. Verse 3 really does bring it back to Swift's master's issue. Though they may have her past, she has herself, and in many ways this is a prologue to the Taylor's versions in my mind. One of my favorite lyrics from the whole record is sometimes walking out is the one thing that will find you the right thing. It's a very real sentiment that makes you take stock of what matters and what's got to go. Closing this album on the lines "You Just Go" was perfect for me. I think Evermore is one of Taylor's best records. Revisiting it made me realize how much I adored this record. Some tracks never really had clicked for me, but this time around they did. I personally wish that this had gotten the Long Pond Sessions treatment itself. I have to give this a very strong 9.7 out of 10. It's such a stunning record, and I really wish that people really acknowledge its part and its legacy in Swift's canon as an artist. I feel like it is a perfect prologue to what we have today, and a very fine conclusion to the folk Evermore duology. And that's a wrap. I want to give a quick shout out to my members and my subscribers and everyone who's been with me throughout this entire journey. Comment below what your favorite track was off Evermore, and I can't wait to see you next video. The sign out was recorded in my childhood bedroom where I really did start this channel, and this is the last time I'm ever recording in here. It really means a lot to me, and it's partially why I recorded this Evermore video to begin with. Evermore is about closing chapters in your life and moving forward, and in a way it's symbolic that I do this video in the room that started this channel. This is Eljon signing out.